Well, good morning, church, and welcome to our online service. Different than what we normally do, but we're still so glad you're here. And if you're a guest with us, this is a great opportunity to get a sense of what we are like as a church. But we will be back in person, I promise, on the 4th of January of 2026. And so wherever you find yourself this morning, whether you're on the beach, having a barbecue, whether you're in your lounge room, making a cup of tea, we're excited to celebrate what this year has been. And so to do that, we are going to go through some highlights of 2025, some of your favorite highlights of the year. We'll be hearing some different messages and as well some stories from you yourself in one of our Northside stories too. So why don't you tune in for the next 20 to 25 minutes or so, and let's celebrate the best of 2025.
But see, one of the greatest demonstrations of God's power in my mind is his ability to bring a whole bunch of different people together in unity. That is just one of the most miraculous aspects of church. The church is different people living differently, and I want to show you the genesis of this. In fact, there are lots of places throughout the scriptures, but one of Jesus' followers, Peter, reminded his followers, like I'm reminding you now, this is the genesis of what makes the church, and he says this. He says, come on, remember, but you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light. And so when we read that, when we say, hang on, you are a chosen people, the minute we hear that word, we think, hang on, isn't that exactly the thing that rubs me up the wrong way about church? Chosen people, people who think that they're special and got it over everyone else. What does all of that mean? But if you look closer, chosen by who? It says you are God's special possession. You are chosen by God. And here's what it meant. Here's what it means for us this morning. The entry point into the tribe, if we want to call it that, called the church, is not based on what you do, but what God has done. If he has chosen you, then the entry point into the church is not what you do. It's not what you think. It's not your distinctive. It's not how you behave. And that's why you can belong before you believe. And so here's the question that I want to ask us this morning, though, is that, look, what if the one thing that bugs you about the church, Christians and the way they behave, is the one thing that should amaze you and transform you through the church? What if the one thing that bugs you is the very thing that should amaze you in all of this? Because what we have to be clear about is that you can't separate Jesus from the church. Have you noticed that you often get people, and maybe you've got a Christian in your life, or maybe you've done this at one point in time, which is fair enough, maybe because of what you've experienced, but have you noticed that we have people in our lives, and they say phrases like this. They say, hey, look, I've got faith in Jesus, but my faith is personal. I don't go to church. So to say that I love Jesus but I don't like the church is kind of like saying that I like Cyndi Lauper, but I don't like the song Girls Just Want to Have Fun. It's like saying I like James Taylor but I don't like the guitar. It's like saying I like Taylor Swift but I don't like the catchy, annoying, get stuck in your head type tunes. It's like saying I'm kind of interested in singers like Jimmy Barnes but I'm not into singers that kind of scream all the time. You see, Cyndi Lauper is Girls Just Want to Have Fun. James Taylor is the guitar. Taylor Swift is the annoying, catchy tunes that I can't get out of my head. And Jimmy Barnes is the screaming. Jesus is the church.
Coming here, it felt very natural to me. It felt like almost like a podcast. I was just talking to someone more experienced than me, talking about Jesus, and just learning from you guys. Like, gave me a really good feeling about this place, and also the people, the community, like Marcos and Clara. They've been really good to me. Made me feel like I wanted to be part of this. So yeah, it's definitely something very, very profound, and it's changing me for someone better.
I didn't have any sort of religious or spiritual context growing up, and I had a lot of trauma as a child. So my mum died when I was 13. And so then I went looking, I was sort of seeking, I guess you could say, and I went into the New Age quite heavily, had a business in the New Age and so forth. So basically two major things happened. So is it all right to
Yeah, of
go on to that?
course.
So basically one day Richard and I, my husband, we were in the city and we were just on a city break weekend, and I was feeling pretty low, pretty down. The new age, you're just sort of constantly working on yourself to try and feel better and searching. And I actually forgot about this part until a couple of years later, but I think it's important for today. In the hotel room was a Gideon Bible. I don't know if there's anyone here who served at Gideon, but praise the Lord, because I was feeling so down, and we had a little break in the afternoon, and I pulled out that Bible from the hotel drawer, and I had a section sort of how you feeling and then looking up scriptures. So I started I sat for about half an hour with that. Didn't think too much of it, but then I got a phone call from a friend, a new age friend of mine who, cut a long story short, was flooding with someone from Hillsong.
Yep.
And she's like, oh, I've got to go out to Hillsong Hills, and my friend, he's overseas, wants me to get some photos with the Aussie crew, blah, blah, blah. Will you come with me for the moral support? I'm like, oh, okay. And I don't know, I think, honestly, reading that Bible must have done something, like God draws you near through his words. So I said, okay. And off I went, and literally it was their afternoon service, so a bit smaller for Hillsong in terms of things. And within 5 minutes of being there, like no one had said anything, it was just the worship. I think someone said, welcome to church. And I just felt like I had an experience of, felt the love of God. And so keep in mind, I was a spiritual teacher, and I was working in the spiritual realms every day. Had strong like meditation practices, all that sort of thing. And I had never felt anything like this. Like the love was so profound. I just basically fell to my knees, and I cried and cried and cried and cried and cried. and it was incredible. Like I still remember it, and like obviously. And then the sermon went on, and the service went on, and I just knew, like something happened then, and I just knew that this was the truth. And I knew Jesus was the way, the truth, and the life, and all of that type of thing. As a non-Christian, you don't know that there is better.
Yeah.
Like I wouldn't say my life was bad before in the scheme of things, you know what I mean? Like I felt bad, but you know, we're very lucky here living where we live and all that sort of thing. So, but what Jesus gives you more than you ever thought possible. And so my marriage is just way better, but I couldn't necessarily put it into words, but it's so much better. My family life is better. One of the things I also wanted to say is like Jesus cares about the everyday stuff, and he gives you freedom. That's probably one of the biggest things.
So at the moment, as Steph said, we've been doing a series called Emotionally Healthy Followers, in which it's all understanding is that to be mature, healthy followers of Jesus, we also need to be emotionally healthy. Because you can't be spiritually mature and be emotionally immature. Emotional health and spiritual health go hand in hand. And this wall that we're going to look at this morning is such a crucial and critical phase in us becoming emotionally healthy followers. It's such a critical place because this is where God actually does his deepest work in our lives. Because it means when we hit the roadblock in our faith, it doesn't mean that we've given up on God. It doesn't actually mean that we have decided to go on a different path. It just means that we don't want to push through to see what's on the other side. And I think why, for some of us that we stay here, I think why it is only 15% that make it through, I had to do maths on the fly then, to make it through, is because we actually think that when we hit the roadblock and we question, we've been told that if we question, we lack faith. So the Bible is actually filled of different people who have faced a crisis, hit the wall, and then journeyed through. You've got Moses, you've got David, you've got Elijah, you've got Paul, you've got Job, you've got Jonah, and you've got Hannah, just to name a few. But I also know a lot of you know what it's like to hit the wall. And I also know a lot of you do actually know what it's like to journey through the wall. And I know that because I know your stories. I know your stories as your pastor, and I've journeyed alongside of them with you. But I know because of the other walls and because I've built that muscle up, I know, as much as I don't want to, I know that I can lift this one up just little by little. Just little by little. You know what? God, I feel your presence. God, I know that you are faithful because you've shown me before. God, I know that you have called me because I'm positive of the call you have on my life. God, I know that you are with me when I feel all alone. God, I still feel lonely, but I'm trusting that you are with me. God, I know that you're with me because I've seen it before. And we're just building and building and building our muscle up to be able to journey through that wall. Now, your walls are going to look very different to mine. Your walls are going to look incredibly different. Maybe you could have all the way up to 100 kilos on here. But it all started here when we made that first choice to journey through. The primary issue at each of the walls is this. Is it's my will versus God's will. The primary issue at the wall isn't just a crisis, but it is this my will or God's will? Because you know what? We all want to be strong. And we all want to be spiritually strong. But we actually want to be in control of our own spiritual strength. And God is saying, actually, if you want to be strong, it's my way that's going to make you strong.
And so work is constantly pushing in against us, right? But here's the thing. Haven't you noticed that even when work stops, we don't? And I'm sure you would never do this, right? But, you know, people apparently check their emails on their day off. Sure, it never happened to you, but people feel guilty when they're not productive. Which makes me wonder, maybe the real problem isn't out here. Maybe the real problem is in here. Maybe the real problem's in here. And that's why I think the other reason is that the other reason why we can't switch off is that the issue is that it's internal. Why can't we say no? Why do some of you feel like you can't stop? Why do some of you feel like someone or something is constantly chasing you around? Why do some of you think that there's a voice inside you that just says, keep going, keep pushing, keep doing? And I think the reason is, that's not, by the way, that's not stress. That's what I call slavery. Right? If you think that modern slavery is not an issue, it is. And most of us are slaves to what Pete Scazzero called the inner Pharaoh. You know, this inner ruler that's constantly cracking the whip. And here's what the inner Pharaoh does. The inner Pharaoh says, you must be this attractive to get into this relationship. You must be this successful in order to be approved. You must be this busy in order to be worthy, right? And the challenge with the inner Pharaoh is it just keeps raising the height, right? You've discovered this, it just keeps pushing it. And so I've just taken those haunting signs inside of me. I call it personally the inner murmur of inadequacy. In other words, that voice inside us that says, you know what, I'm not acceptable to my boss, I'm not acceptable to my workmates, I'm not acceptable to others, I'm not acceptable to God if you've got a problem with religion, but most importantly, and this is what drives us, I'm not acceptable to me. And so we constantly push. And so the issue is not, can I suggest to you this morning, not the work, but it's actually the work beneath the work. It's actually what's underneath. It's why you are working so hard. It's why you're pushing. It is why, by the way, that you can be either out of work, in between work, or retiree and still feel exhausted, because you are constantly trying to live up to this voice of the inner Pharaoh that says you must be this tall to ride this ride. Here's what I want you to see today, and I want you to grab this, that Sabbath, stopping to rest one day a week, is not just a good idea, it's a God idea. And the reason that it's a God idea is because this is part of God's, I don't know how you would put it, service manual for the soul. You know this, if any of you have been lucky enough to buy a car for the first time, you know, what does the salesman say to you when you buy a brand new car? He gets out the little manual out of the glove box and he says, you know, here's your servicing schedule. Ever seen that? And so And so you need to service according to the owner's manual. And so what I find absolutely hilarious is that you have a whole bunch of modern people in the lower North Shore of Sydney. When I sit up there at Mazda to put my car into service, I see all of these professional, driven, burnt out, exhausted people putting their car in for service every 6 months, but they're not servicing their soul. It's stupid. It's crazy. And we push and we drive and we drive and we drive. And so God knows this. And so he has this principle of taking a rest, 24 hours, one rest each week. And so we pick up a verse here that I want to show you how this works, actually from the New Testament in Hebrews. And yet his work has been finished since the creation of the world. For somewhere it is spoken that on the seventh day, God rested from all of his work. Now, when we read that, it starts to beg the question. And if you're kind of a little mini theologian, I hope you're with me. Have you ever considered this? Why would God rest from his work? God rested. Not because he had to, but because he could, because he was satisfied, because he looked at what he did and he said, you know what, it's just work. It's just work. Can I suggest that some of you, like that could be the biggest gift that you could have this week, is just to go into your workplace and detach your sense of identity from it and go, it's just work. Sounds easy to say, doesn't it? Right? And we've got to recognize that there is a wrestle for us here. I mean, like, what if the real problem for you is not that you've got too much to do, but you just don't trust God with the outcome at the end of the week?
The second shift, the second way that Jesus redefines requirements of what it means to love neighbor is he redefines how much you love your neighbor. He redefines how much you love your neighbor. I just want to do a quick case study. Imagine if the parable ended here. But a Samaritan, as he traveled, he came where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. Imagine if that was the end of the parable. Sometimes, the least effective thing we can do is just saying, my thoughts and prayers are with you. Sometimes the least effective thing we can do is changing our Facebook profile picture to whatever the updated world pandemic is or the world issue is. Sometimes that in isolation isn't enough. It's not helpful enough. Because there's a very real need that's going on. But that's not how the story ends, is it? The story continues. As Samaritans he traveled, he took pity on him. And what does he do next? He went to him. He bandaged his wounds. He put the man on his own donkey. He took care of him. He took care of him. And so ultimately what Jesus is saying through this parable is this, is that neighborly love, it looks like shifting from sentiment to substance. That true Jesus, neighborly love, that if you want to follow Jesus, you want to know what it looks like to care for those around you, it looks often like shifting from sentiment to substance. It looks like shifting from, here are my thoughts and prayers, to, well, what can I tangibly do about this? And so Jesus challenges this. You want to know how much you should love those around you? Well, ask yourself the question, your love isn't enough until you feel the cost of neighborly love. The question is, do you feel the cost of neighborly love? When you're caring for those around you, do you feel it in your bank balance? Do you feel it in your time that you've given? If you maybe had to sacrifice something as simple as the extra coffee you normally have in a week because you were able to give a little bit more to those around you. So Jesus redefines it. What's the minimum requirement, we ask? Well, Jesus says, well, maybe you're not doing enough if you don't feel the cost of neighborly love. Now that's a big ask, and it's a big bar. And you may think, well, where do I start? Well, the only way you start is with driving a car, right? You can't go up to 100 miles an hour until you start with 1 mile an hour. And so maybe frame it like this. This is a quote from Andy Stanley, says this: "Do for one what you wish you could do for everyone." Do for one what you wish you could do for everyone.
We are the generation that's responsible now for stewarding Northside in this generation and the next. And you're here, and if you're here and we're here, then God calls us to steward this church for this season. Just faith expressing itself through love. Committing to be the sort of people that will pass whatever we have known of God's faithfulness from this generation to the next. And so this morning, if you're part of our current story at Northside, I want to ask you this question. Will you, as we move forward into our future, prepare a place for someone that you may never know? Will you do all the things that you can in the way that God has been doing in recent years to protect this place and to make sure that we just keep the main thing, faith expressing itself through love? No politics, no arguments, no agendas, none of all the junky stuff that people can't stand about Christians. Just the things that we love, and we know that if we do a PowerPoint slide in the years to come, people will pass down and say, that's what I remember about Northside. Thank you, Northsiders, of that earlier era, that DNA still remains in this church. Thank you to those of you that have gone before. If you want to know how we steward this generation through to the next, it's really simple. This is how you do it. You do it like the way that my pastor did it. When I first arrived here, I'd been through lots of different seasons of knowing Northside. I've been here for 30 years this year, I think. But in this particular year as a young adult, I had gone through a crisis. I was seeking God again, and I thought I would turn up to church. And there was my pastor, Troy, waiting for me there at the door. I didn't know he'd be my pastor. He was just a friendly guy. And then he became my pastor after like a multitude of lunches where there was like 3 young adults in the whole place. Remember, Ed? It was just old Herbert Street days, and it was like me, the Kennedys, and Kieran. I think that was about it. And so Troy just would take me out every chance to go and have lunch in my corporate job. I had no desire to be in the ministry. And every time we would finish lunch, he'd say, Sam, you know what? I'm praying one day you'll be sitting in my seat. And here we are. Do you pray that prayer over someone that you know? Do you want to pray that prayer over someone that you know? Because look, I know that you know there is someone in your life that you would love to love Jesus. If you love Jesus, there is someone in your life that you would love to love Jesus. And I know that person, as they come to mind for you this morning, I don't know, maybe it's a grandkid, or maybe it's one of your kids, or maybe it's a friend at work, or maybe it's just a friend. There is someone I know in your life, if you love Jesus, that you would love to love Jesus. And wouldn't it stand to reason that you would love them to turn up to a place that is warm and inviting and efficient at sermons and accessible to them and has the same love and the same fun and the same energy that we've carried forward for 40 years? Wouldn't you love that? And that's all that we could hope, that as we look forward to the next 40, and I know for some of us, including myself now, because apparently I'm getting old. For some of us, as we think about 40 years, for the first time in my life, I start to think, well, I may not be here. And that could be every reason for us to tap out of God's vision for our church. And can I remind you this morning, if you're 40 and above, that this church needs you now. They need your story. They need your wisdom. They need your love. They need your presence. They need your stewardship of this generation for the next. And as we continue to pour that into the church, as Lorraine had said so beautifully, with God's faithfulness, it can't help but blossom as we do another 40 years. And so as the band come up this morning, I want to remind us that as we look back, it kind of hit me this week, all of the effort that we put into doing what we're doing, God spoke to me in a profound way. He said, Sam, you know what? Every morning that you get up, every sleepless night that you have, every elders meeting that runs for 3.5 hours, everything that you get stressed about, every person that your heart breaks for that's no longer with you, all of that will eventually, in my name, be reduced to one photo on a PowerPoint slide in 40 years' time.
Well, what a great year 2025 has been for our church. And just a reminder, if you are watching this morning, that we believe that life is better in 3D. And so next Sunday on the 4th of January, we'll be having live in-person services back again from 10 a.m. here at Crows Nest and as well at Turramurra. And you can also still tune in online as well. And so if you want to connect with us during this time, you can head to our description and connect with us there. We'll have some of our online hosts as well who would love to chat to you. But otherwise, we look forward to seeing you in the new year and seeing you on a Sunday in January soon.